10,000 steps a day actually a good goal? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the never-ending, super popular recommendation of taking 10,000 steps a day. For some people, 10,000 steps a day is super easy to do, especially if they have an active job where they're walking around a lot, or for whatever reason they have all the time in the world and they can walk endless amounts all day. But for most people, getting 10,000 steps a day can be quite a challenge. Like, let's be real for a second. Getting 10,000 steps a day isn't something that you can achieve in 30 minutes. For the average person, depending on how fast you're walking, this can be like an hour-and-a-half walk a day. So that's a lot of time to dedicate to just getting your steps in. So in today's video, I want to review the research with you and let you know what it says in terms of if 10,000 steps a day is something that you should actually aim for, or if there's a better number out there that we really should go for. But first, hi, my name is Katey. I'm a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer. My goal with this channel is to help you learn more about nutrition, fitness, and wellness so that you can be your best, whatever that looks like. I also love to do product and topic reviews, so if you have anything that you want me to cover, just let me know in the comments below. And with that, let's get started. Where did 10,000 steps even come from? Imagine this: you're scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever app you use, and you see yet another person saying they got their 10,000 steps in for the day, and sometimes even higher. And maybe you wonder to yourself, how do they get 10,000 steps a day? How do they have time to do all this walking? And do I have to get 10,000 steps a day to be healthy? Well, let's go back to the root of where 10,000 steps came from. So back in 1965, there was a Japanese fitness company that created a new pedometer that counted your steps, and it was known as Mampokai. And this translated roughly to 10,000 steps a day. This goal of getting 10,000 steps a day was purely a marketing campaign because they wanted people to buy their product to help them count their steps and ultimately reach this goal. And since then, it has soared in popularity as the gold standard number of steps that you need to take in order to be healthy. But is that number rooted in research? Let's take a look. So what's the research on 10,000 steps a day? Since the 10,000 steps per day goal has been around for like 60 years, we fortunately do have quite a bit of research on it. Now, when we're deciding if it is good for our health or not, there are a couple things that we need to keep in mind because it depends on what type of health outcome or parameter that we're looking at. For example, some studies look at walking 10,000 steps and mortality, which is the risk of death. Some studies look at 10,000 steps and heart disease risk. Some studies look at 10,000 steps and how it will help people with overweight and obesity. And some studies look at 10,000 steps and how it may affect mental health outcomes. So while this video is talking about 10,000 steps a day in general, it is important that when we look at the research, we need to know what the outcome was, because sometimes you'll notice that maybe for one outcome, you need to walk more steps, but maybe for another outcome, you don't need to walk as many. So those are just things to keep in mind as we go through this. So first, let's look at mortality or risk of death. So in 2022, there was a huge meta-analysis posted in The Lancet, which is a very high, well-regarded journal. And in this study, they reviewed 15 cohort studies. Now, a cohort study is simply looking at a group of people over time and analyzing a specific outcome. In this case, it was mortality or risk of death. And in total, they had 47,471 participants, which is a lot. So what they did was they made up 4 different groups representing different number of steps taken per day. So they had the first quartile, the second quartile, the third quartile, and then the fourth. The first quartile was the lowest number of steps group, and the fourth quartile represented the people who took the most amount of steps per day. And as we can see on this chart, I'll help you navigate through it, but as we can see on this chart, those who took the highest amount of steps and were in the fourth quartile group had the lowest risk of mortality. And this was compared to those that were in the lowest step count group, which was the first quartile. And even those that were in the second and third quartile, so still taking more steps than the lowest group, still had a lower risk of death. And interestingly, from this, we do see that females seem to benefit a little bit more from taking more steps, but we need more research on that. And also what they did was they wanted to analyze the number of steps taken per day by age group, particularly those over the age of 60 versus under the age of 60. And the reason they wanted to do this was because people over the age of 60 may have different health issues that may affect their ability to take as many steps per day. They may have different injuries, they they may have different ailments. They also typically have a slower cadence or a slower pace of walking, and so they might not be able to achieve as many steps compared to those under the age of 60. So by dividing them in two, they were able to analyze if those over 60 could get fewer steps per day and still find benefit. And when we look at this chart that compares age groups, we do see that those that were above the age of 60 did have benefits with walking fewer steps a day compared to those under 60. And for those above the age of 60, the lowest quartile had about 3,000 steps per day, while those under the age of 60 had their lowest quartile set around 5,000. And from this chart, what we see is that when we look at those that were above the age of 60, their lowest quartile was around 3,000 steps. And those that got lower than 3,000 steps per day had a higher risk of mortality. For those that were in the group that was under the age of 60, their lowest quartile was around 5,000 steps per day, and those that got under 5,000 steps per day had a higher risk of mortality compared to those that got more. And as you can see, as someone's step count increases, the risk of mortality goes down. But it does start to level off at certain number of steps. For those over the age of 60, it seems to be around 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day, and then after that, it doesn't make as big of a difference. And then those that were under the age of 60, it seems to be around 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day before it starts leveling off and not making as big of a difference. But based on this, we see that taking more steps does seem to lower the risk of mortality. Based on this, it appears that younger populations should try to get about 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day to lower their risk of mortality. For older populations, they might not need to walk as much, and getting around 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day seems to ultimately lower their risk too. And this study is in line with other studies that have found that taking around 7,500 steps a day lowers your risk of overall all-cause mortality or death. For example, this study that was published in 2019 in JAMA, which is another great journal, they looked at 16,741 US women that walked with a pedometer. And from this, they found that risk of mortality leveled off around 7,500 steps, meaning that as long as somebody was walking approximately 7,500 steps a day, they did have a lower risk of mortality. And they found that for every 1,000 additional steps, up to about 7,500 steps a day, there was a progressively lower risk of mortality. On top of that, there was a 2023 meta-analysis in over 111,000 people, so a huge group of people, that found that for every 1,000 step increase, there was a 23% lower risk of all-cause mortality. And when they compared the lowest step count group, so those that were taking about 4,200 steps a day, to those in the highest step count group, taking around 9,200 steps per day, those in the highest step count group had a 36.65 lower risk of all-cause mortality. On top of that, they looked at cardiovascular disease or heart disease, and they found that every additional 500 steps per day lowered heart disease risk by 6%. And again, those that were in the highest step count group had a 43% lower risk of death compared to those that were in the lowest step count group. However, when they did some other analyses and compared when you use an accelerometer to a pedometer just counts your steps, while an accelerometer counts the time as well as the steps. The numbers slightly changed, but they were still overall significantly impressive and positive towards those that took more steps each day. If we look at this graph here, we see that there is a significant decrease in relative risk of all-cause mortality at around 6,600 steps a day. And then after that, it starts to slowly level off. And this is in line again with all the other studies that we talked about, where after a certain number of steps, there does seem to be some leveling off. So the benefit isn't as big as you get beyond about, let's say, about 7,000, 7,500 steps a day. But what we can see from these studies is it does appear that taking more steps a day is linked with better health outcomes. And based on these studies, getting 10,000 steps a day is, yes, a very good goal. But it is not absolutely mandatory in order to improve your health. As we saw, even an additional 1,000 steps a day can lower your overall risk. And any increase in steps can be a benefit. And there are so many other studies that also support this. I just don't think we want to be here all day reviewing these studies. Okay, so now what about weight loss? Does 10,000 steps per day help with losing weight? So I'm sure you've heard the saying before, eat less and move more. It's very popular to say to people that want to lose weight. And so by that logic, we would assume that adding more steps into your day will help you lose weight. What's great about walking is that it is free, it's accessible, and almost everyone can do it. And it is a really efficient and effective way to be more active in a day. However, the answer for this isn't as clear cut because there are a lot of factors that we need to consider when we're talking about weight loss. First of all, we want to lose body fat. We don't want to lose muscle mass. So is adding extra walking and steps a day going to just help you burn fat, or will there be some muscle loss too? Also, Also, weight loss is achieved through a calorie deficit, and you can achieve a calorie deficit through one of three ways. You can either eat fewer calories, you can exercise more, or you can do a combination of both, which is always recommended. So if you are doing a combination method and you're having fewer calories from food and you're burning more calories from walking, is it actually the increase in steps that's causing the weight loss, or is it that combination effect, which is probably the case? Also, are you doing other forms of exercise? So for example, if you're doing strength training or you're doing Pilates or you're doing whatever, is that also contributing to the weight loss? And so is it just doing the extra steps a day that's making the difference? And there are also so many other things to consider too. Now, if you're not walking a lot per day, then absolutely getting more steps in every single day is going to benefit your health and potentially could lead to weight loss, especially if you're also adopting a healthier diet too. However, if you're already getting like 5,000 to 8,000 steps per day and you're only increasing your step count a little bit to get to that 10,000 steps, is that going to help promote enough of a calorie deficit that's going to help you lose weight? That's where the question comes in. This really ultimately depends on the person, how long they're walking, their intensity, as well as other factors, for example, such as their initial body weight. So let's say we use a calorie estimator tool. Yes, these have flaws and they're not perfect and they have some discrepancies, but this one's really closely in line with the CDC's guidance. And let's say we use a sample person that weighs 175 pounds. And we say that they go for a 1 hour walk at a moderate pace, which is about 3 miles an hour. According to this, they will burn about 261 calories, give or take. If we bump this up to a brisk pace, so about 3.5 miles per hour, this is about 301 calories. Now keep in mind that getting 10,000 steps usually takes more than an hour. It's usually about an hour and a half depending on how fast you're walking. So this definitely isn't terrible. Burning an extra like 300 calories from walking definitely can be beneficial, especially to someone who's barely needing 2,000 steps a day and now they're hitting 10,000 steps a day. That can be significant for them. Another thing we need to keep in mind is the weight of the person, because that changes things too. It is going to be harder for someone of a smaller body size to burn enough calories to achieve a calorie deficit just from walking compared to someone of a larger body size, because they are moving more weight with them and they also have more wiggle room in terms of achieving a calorie deficit. So if we do the same walking pace for an hour, but for someone who is 300 pounds, we see that they will burn just a little less than double of somebody who's 175 pounds. But this is assuming that you went from 0 walking to this amount of walking. Most people still walk a certain number of steps a day. So it's actually likely less additional calories than this if you were to add some extra steps a day, unless you're going for an hour walk in addition to how much you're already walking, let's say at work, or just going around the house or doing errands that you need to do. So for example, let's say in total, you usually get about 30 minutes of walking throughout your day at a decent pace. Using the same 175-pound person example, this would be about an extra 130 to about 150 extra calories burned from walking that additional 30 minutes to get you up to about an hour. So is this enough to support a calorie deficit? Generally speaking, if you want to achieve a healthy calorie deficit, a good goal is to have a calorie deficit that's about 10 to 20% the calories you need per day to stay at maintenance. So let's say that somebody needs 2,200 calories a day, then 10% to 20% of a calorie deficit would be about 220 to 440 calories per day deficit. Now, if you are burning your calories from taking extra steps and you're slightly eating less calories, then you totally could achieve it just from adding this small amount of steps. However, it is very, very difficult to exercise yourself into a calorie deficit by itself, meaning that you're having the same amount of calories that you did, but you're just exercising so much that you're burning all of those calories. And this is why we don't recommend that people do that. And usually it's recommended to add exercise and add a slight calorie deficit to achieve a healthy calorie deficit that will lead to weight loss. So when someone's asking, does 10,000 steps a day lead to weight loss? It's a bit complicated because it depends on all of these factors. And usually you're going to have to walk a lot in order to have weight loss without considering maybe eating fewer calories, doing other forms of exercise, and so on. Does that mean you should give up walking for weight loss? You should definitely make sure that you're trying to get as many steps per day as possible, and it's definitely good for your health. For example, maybe you try to hit 10,000 steps per day, and maybe you try to eat a very nutritious diet, and maybe you also do some other forms of exercise such as strength training for a really well-rounded healthy lifestyle. This helps you nicely tie in various opportunities to achieve a calorie deficit without solely relying on walking endless amounts all day. As a side note, if you don't want to lose weight, but you still want to achieve 10,000 steps per day because it does have health benefits and Remember, health isn't just losing weight. Health is so much more than that, and not everyone needs to lose weight. So if you want to achieve 10,000 steps per day, just make sure that you're eating enough calories so that you stay at maintenance. However, if you are not very active at all and you would like to achieve weight loss, increasing your physical activity will likely support weight loss, at least over time. Now, when it comes to the research, there isn't as much research on this because of all of these complicated factors that I've talked about. The issue is that most studies that look at weight loss and 10,000 steps per day also have the people on a calorie restricted diet. So it's hard to say if 10,000 steps a day by itself will actually lead to meaningful weight loss. But that being said, I did find a study that actually discussed these limitations and wanted to do a study on their own. Granted, it wasn't a randomized controlled trial, but it still was a helpful study. So what they did was they had people report their overall step goal with the ultimate goal of being 10,000 steps per day, or they had a goal of achieving 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week. And they could pick which one they wanted to achieve. And basically they wanted to see if one or the other was more beneficial in promoting weight loss, or if both were good modalities for helping with weight loss. And what they found in the study and concluded was that regardless of whether or not someone achieved 10,000 steps per day or they achieved 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week, both did promote weight loss. The caveat here though is that almost all participants struggled to get 10,000 steps per day and struggled to get 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week. So in either case, whatever their goal was, they were very hard to achieve. And this highlights the main issue right now online where people make it out to be so easy to get 10,000 steps per day, or they make it so easy to get, over an hour of physical activity a day. For the average person, this is a challenge, and I like that this study at least brought this to light. That being said, they did find that those who made a goal of trying to get 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week had more success in achieving that goal than those who tried to get 10,000 steps a day. And this makes sense because trying to get 10,000 steps a day is going to be a lot. It's oftentimes, if you do it all in one go, it's going to be like an hour and a half walk, if not more, or you're going to have multiple walks a day. But if you divide 200 minutes by 7 days a week, that's about 28.5 minutes or about 30 minutes a day of activity. So it makes sense that doing that goal would be easier than trying to get 10,000 steps a day. And the other thing is that you can achieve those 200 minutes through any modality that you want, whether it's walking, running, swimming, biking, doing strength training, Pilates. It didn't matter as long as the person was getting their heart rate elevated. And the authors even discuss how maybe we need to start reassessing our goals and what the goal should be for achieving good health. Because if most people aren't even getting 5,000 steps per day, asking them to just all of a sudden go from 5,000 to 10,000 steps per day is a very big jump. So maybe instead of aiming for 10,000 steps a day, maybe you aim for 7,000 steps a day, or maybe 8,000, or build up from wherever you started at. And the authors concluded that, of course, getting that 10,000 steps per day or that 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week definitely is good for your health, and we don't want to take away from that. If you can get 10,000 steps a day, that's amazing. If you can get 200 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week, that's fantastic. But those who got 75% of their step goal, so 7,500 steps a day, still did achieve some weight loss. So again, you start to see that 7,500 steps a day, give or take, seems to be a really nice actual goal for the average person to try to strive for. So while we obviously need more research to understand the exact number of steps a person needs to take per day to lose weight, although I don't think we'll ever get there because, again, there are so many factors that we need to consider, we can at least feel confident that increasing physical activity in general, whether that is from achieving a high step count or getting exercise in another way, is certainly beneficial for our health. Ultimately, though, I think the main takeaway from this is that if you want to achieve meaningful weight loss, then it's really ideal to focus on your overall lifestyle. So absolutely try to get in as many steps a day as you can, but maybe you also focus on other forms of activity too, such as strength training. And maybe you also focus on making sure that you're eating a nutritious diet. All of these things are going to help you the most. And like I've talked about in so many videos, we want to preserve our muscle mass during weight loss. We don't just want to see everything come off of us. Muscle mass is so important for our overall health, but particularly our metabolic health. And so when we're losing weight, we want to try our best to preserve it. And the best way that you can preserve your muscle mass during weight loss is, one, to have a high protein diet. So getting about 1.4 to 2.2 grams per kilogram per day, 0.66 to about 1.0 grams per pound per day, depending on where you are in the world. The other thing you can do is make sure that you're doing strength training exercise to stimulate muscle protein synthesis to prevent that muscle from deteriorating and being lost. So again, as you can see, yeah, definitely get those 10,000 steps or as high as you possibly can, but make sure you're also doing other things that are important as well, such as strength training, eating a healthy diet, getting proper sleep, and so on. Okay, so what are some other benefits of 10,000 steps per day? Beyond what we've already talked about, getting 10,000 steps per day, or at least a higher step count, is linked with other health benefits too. For example, research has found that those that get a higher step count have a lower risk of depression, anxiety, and other negative mental health issues. For example, one study that was done in 2018 in 1,963 participants found that those who got more than 10,000 steps per day had better mental health outcomes. They had 8.9% lower stress levels, 7.6% decrease in depressive symptoms, a 5% decrease in anxiety, and a 2.1% improvement in overall well-being. And those who got more than 10,000 steps per day had better outcomes than those that got less than 10,000 steps a day. That said, the authors did argue that 10,000 steps is a bit arbitrary, and when you start accounting for people's individual differences, it really ultimately depends on the person in terms of how many steps a day is needed for them to have benefit. And see, this is where that nuance of the individual comes into play. So yes, for the general population, 10,000 steps a day is a good goal, but everyone's a little bit different. On top of this, research has found that getting more steps per day also is associated with better sleep. So overall, it seems that walking more on a daily basis is important for our health and is beneficial on almost all fronts. Okay, so let's finish off by some tips to help you walk more. So if you want to increase your step count, here are a few things that you can do. One, if you work at your desk all day, let's say at home, then maybe you put your printer in another room, or maybe you put your phone upstairs or downstairs so that you actually have to get up and go to it so that you're moving more. Number two is to park your car further in a parking lot. My boyfriend hates this, but it is a really easy way to get in some extra steps every day, and it also protects your car. Number three is to walk to places that are not very far. Maybe you can walk to a store or to your friend's house or to work or to school, something that's pretty close that you don't necessarily have to drive to. Number four is to socialize with people by being active. So maybe you go for a long walk with your friends, or maybe if you have a meeting with a coworker, you can go for a walk instead of meeting at each other's desks. Number five is to listen to a really good podcast or maybe an audiobook and go for a walk. Or maybe you watch a video on YouTube or you watch a TV show on a treadmill. Number six is kind of fun, is that you can get a dog, because dogs do help people be more active because they need to go for walks. And number seven is actually something I recently did, is that I bought a walking pad and I bought a standing desk so that I can actually walk on the walking pad while I'm working on my computer, because I work at my desk a lot. In fact, majority of the script that was written for this video, I did it while I was walking on a walking pad, and my daily steps have gone up so much. Really, at the end of the day, the goal is to move your body more. Honestly, don't be lazy. Don't make everything so convenient for yourself. Try to set your life up so that you gotta move a little bit. Okay, so now what are my overall thoughts? As we saw in this video, getting 10,000 steps per day is an amazing goal, and if you can do it, then definitely keep it up. But it is not absolutely mandatory in order to be healthy. Most research seems to find that about 7,000 steps to 7,500 steps a day is a really good goal for improving health. However, any increase in steps is also beneficial. So if you're only getting 2,000 steps a day, going up to 5,000 or even going up to 4,000 is still a really good thing. And I'm not ever going to tell you to walk less, because it is important. So if you can achieve as many as you can, that's great. But I also want you to set realistic goals for yourself that you know you can achieve. So if you find walking 10,000 steps a day impossible, then don't make that your goal. Make a goal that's realistic for you and is something that is motivating for you to achieve on a daily basis. If you love walking 10,000 steps a day, keep it up. That is awesome. Either way, all we need to focus on is moving our bodies more to support our health. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if there are any other topics, products, or anything that you want me to review. And if you did enjoy this video, I would love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel. It helps support my channel and reach more people like you. And I'll see you in the next video.